Have you ever felt like something was off, but you couldn't explain why? Like a message left unread, a warm smile that suddenly fades, or a connection that slips through your fingers without warning. What if I told you? Some women really don't want you watching this video because it reveals truths they've learned to hide in plain sight. Some truths aren't meant to hurt, but they do disrupt the balance in relationships because once seen, they can't be unseen. These aren't bitter revelations. They're uncomfortable simply because they expose hidden patterns, behaviors that have quietly influenced attraction for years without being called out. When I first shared the idea for this video with a few women I knew, some were old friends, others former partners, their reactions were unanimous. Each of them gently urged me not to go forward, not because they were angry, not because they felt attacked, but because they understood something powerful. What you're about to learn might change how you look at the emotional undercurrents that drive connection. And once you notice these patterns, it's impossible to pretend you don't see them. This video isn't about pointing fingers. It's not here to play the blame game or fuel resentment. It's a quiet mirror, one that gives men the space to reflect on feelings they've sensed, but never fully made sense of. Because behind every ignored text, behind the affection that cools overnight, behind those emotional shifts that leave you wondering what just happened, there are ancient psychological instincts at work. Today, we'll uncover the silent strategies that quietly shape a woman's emotional world. These aren't tricks. They're not games. They're instinctive behaviors rooted in protection, learned through experience and built for emotional survival. From the power of strategic silence, to the subtle art of emotional mirroring, to the hidden construction of internal hierarchies, these are not acts of manipulation. They're social blueprints, developed over time and passed down across generations. So if you've ever found yourself second-guessing everything, feeling like connection is a puzzle with missing pieces, or asking yourself, why does it feel like I'm playing a game I was never taught the rules to? Then stay with me, because what you'll discover today might not just shift how you view the women in your life. It might just shift how you see yourself in every connection that follows. Sometimes, what feels like silence is actually the loudest message of all. As we touched on in the previous section, when a woman seems distant or withdrawn, it's rarely an accident. In fact, that silence can be one of her most powerful tools of observation. #1. The power of strategic silence in those quiet spaces between her words, when she stops texting back, when her tone softens into stillness, there's a hidden world unfolding. It's not that she's disconnected. It's that she's processing, reflecting, and observing with an intensity most men were never taught to recognize. When a woman becomes quiet, it doesn't necessarily mean she's lost interest. Sometimes it means she's listening more closely than ever. Not just to what you say, but to how you respond when nothing is being said at all. Her silence isn't empty. It's full of subtle cues, quiet testing, and careful emotional calibration. While a man might feel abandoned or confused, she is, at that very moment, watching how he navigates the unknown. Women grow up in environments that often reward quiet perception over direct confrontation. From a young age, they're taught to read the room, feel the shift in energy, and pay close attention to the unsaid. In that sense, silence doesn't equal weakness. It evolves into a form of strength, a way of gaining insight without needing to ask for it out loud. Think of it like this. A pause during a disagreement isn't just about calming down. It's a moment where your character steps forward on its own, without prompts, without direction. Just you and how you react when left alone with your emotions. When she holds off on replying to a heartfelt message. When she takes her time before responding to your vulnerable confession. When she sits still in the heat of an argument instead of immediately engaging ... She isn't pulling away. She's collecting emotional data. Your second message, your urgency, the tone you use, whether your voice is grounded or reactive. All of it becomes part of a mental map she's building, often without even realizing it. She begins to understand your attachment style, how much uncertainty you can tolerate, and most importantly, how deeply you rely on external reassurance. In her stillness, your insecurities surface. In her silence, your need for control quietly exposes itself. And here's the thing, most of this isn't even calculated. It's intuitive, passed down through generations of women who learned that in a world where their voices were often overlooked, silence could command more attention than any speech ever could. Silence is not a punishment. It's not cold or manipulative. It's a break in the usual rhythm. And that break unsettles men, especially those conditioned to fix, to explain, to persuade. Men often rush in, trying to patch what feels like a void. They offer apologies, over-explain, or pour out anxious words to regain comfort. But here's the deeper truth. She's not asking for words. She's watching for truth. The kind that only reveals itself when there's no script to follow. A woman doesn't always need to hear a man say what he feels. She reads it in his body language. She notices if he grows quiet or loud. If his eyes go soft or hard. If he holds his ground or spirals into confusion. It's not about what he says. It's about who he becomes when everything feels uncertain. Yes, for many men, that silence feels like a test. And in some ways it is, but not a trap, not a trick. It's a test of steadiness, a test of presence. Can you hold your center when things get uncomfortable? A woman's silence, whether it's conscious or instinctual, gives her clarity. It allows her to see beyond the performance, to glimpse the emotional foundation beneath the surface. The men who understand this don't rush. They don't perform. They remain grounded, calm, observant, and composed. That stillness, that restraint, it speaks volumes, because real communication doesn't always happen through words. Sometimes it's in the breath between them, in the pause, in the patience, in the ability to be without needing to prove. And in those moments, she's not necessarily deciding whether or not she likes you. She's noticing whether you can handle the weight of her presence. If silence reveals a man's center, then what follows next shows how a woman feels her way into connection, often without saying a word. Number 2. The mysterious art of emotional mirroring in emotionally charged conversations, especially between men and women. There's often an invisible current flowing beneath the words. Something quiet, fluid, and intuitive. You may not notice it at first, but once you do, it's unmistakable. The rhythm of her tone, the subtle shifts in her expression, the emotional atmosphere she creates without ever stating her intentions. This is emotional mirroring. Unlike a blunt show of affection or disinterest, emotional mirroring is layered, delicate, responsive, and deeply intelligent. It's not just empathy. It's an emotional choreography, a finely tuned dance where a woman aligns herself with the mood of the moment and reflects it with uncanny precision. Imagine this. She's speaking with a bold, fast-talking entrepreneur. Her energy rises to meet his. Her laughter comes quicker, Her body language becomes lively, her curiosity sharpens. Now picture her sitting with a soft-spoken academic. Her tone softens, her posture steadies, and her speech slows into thoughtful pauses. Different energy, different reflection. Yet it's the same woman, intuitively adjusting, not to manipulate, but to attune. This kind of adaptation is not random. It's a socially refined skill that allows her to accomplish two subtle but powerful things at once. First, it builds rapport. When a woman mirrors a man's emotional tone, it creates a sense of harmony, a feeling of we just click. He feels seen, heard, like she just gets him. This perceived synchronicity naturally lowers his defenses. He opens up, he shares more than he might have intended. And he doesn't realize that what he's feeling isn't coincidence, it's been gently, skillfully facilitated. Second, wow. That bond is forming. She begins assessing him. Silently. She watches how he reacts as the emotional energy between them subtly shifts. Does he stay steady? Does he lead the energy? Or does he follow it? When she mirrors intensity, does he escalate? When she mirrors calm, does he settle? These responses offer her rich psychological data without needing to ask a single probing question. Through this emotional reflection, she begins to see his emotional intelligence, the structure of his ego, and the needs he might not yet be aware of himself. It's important to note, this isn't necessarily manipulation. It's adaptation. For many women, mirroring is a way to navigate emotional dynamics, especially in environments where direct vulnerability could be risky or misunderstood. It gives her a safe vantage point. From behind that mirror, she can both give and receive truth without exposing herself too soon. Sometimes her mirrored tone quietly says, "I get you." But it doesn't always mean she agrees. It simply means she's opening the door to your truth, while still deciding if it's one she wants to step into. To the unaware man, this can feel almost magnetic. The connection seems instant. It feels intimate, natural, like something rare. Here's where confusion often begins. He may mistake this emotional alignment for emotional investment. Just because she reflects your energy doesn't mean she's moved by it. She might simply be studying it more closely than you realize. In today's world, where superficial signals are often misread as deep interest, emotional mirroring stands apart. It's not just about laughing at a joke or leaning into conversation. It's about the way she effortlessly adapts from warmth to reserve, from open expression to quiet observation, without ever losing track of you in the process. She watches how you respond to each shift. If you react too fast, she senses impulsiveness. If you pull away, she notes insecurity. If you stay calm and grounded, unshaken by the rise and fall of tone, she begins to trust your core. This is why some women seem to form connections easily, yet commit rarely. They speak the language of emotion fluently, but they reserve trust for those who show consistency under subtle pressure. To truly understand emotional mirroring is to see not just how a woman connects, but how she chooses what to respond to, what to resist, and ultimately what to respect. If emotional mirroring is how she connects, then what comes next reveals how she chooses, how she silently prioritizes those connections without ever needing to speak the words aloud. Number 3, the secret ranking system. There is an invisible sorting process happening in the background of many of a woman's interactions with men. It's not calculated. It's not spoken. And it's certainly not cruel. But it is constant. Quietly, internally, she is assessing, organizing, and emotionally filtering the men in her orbit, not with spreadsheets or logic, but through subtle cues, lived experience, and emotional memory. This mental ranking system is built not from manipulation, but from emotional economy. It reflects her need to protect her energy, to invest where there is value, and to retreat where there is noise. Over time, this hierarchy is shaped, often unconsciously, by attraction, disappointment, trust, and clarity. At the very top, not necessarily the richest, the most handsome, or the loudest, but the men who stand firm in their identity, the ones who don't chase approval, who don't over-explain themselves, who don't bend to be liked. These men carry themselves with a quiet self-respect so grounded, so unwavering that it draws women in without force. They don't demand attention, yet they receive it. Not out of dominance, but out of emotional composure. Around these men, a woman often feels something she can't name right away. She might check her phone more often for their messages. She may naturally want to hear their perspective before making a decision. She finds herself introducing them to her world, friends, family, routines without hesitation. It's not always something she's fully aware of, but her behavior reveals it. In her mind, he ranks highest. Just beneath that level are the men who bring enjoyment, lightheartedness, or useful distraction. They're fun, charming, easy to be around. She might laugh with them, invite them to events, or spend time with them during stressful days. But emotionally, something is missing. These men provide moments, not meaning. She may reply quickly some days, disappear the next. She shares surface stories, but rarely her real fears. They're part of her life, but never fully inside it. She doesn't imagine a future with them. She simply passes time. Lower still are the men she tolerates, not out of affection, but from habit or politeness. They linger on the edges, always available, always agreeable. They're kind, yes, but they don't stir anything within her. She neither seeks them out nor avoids them. She may forget about them until they pop up again. And when they do, she responds with warmth that feels more like duty than desire. At the base of this hierarchy are the men she distances herself from. Sometimes it's because they've crossed a line. Other times because they clung too tightly, too soon. Whatever the cause, their presence now feels heavy. Every text, every encounter starts to feel like a negotiation. She doesn't respond slowly out of cruelty. She delays, avoids, or deflects because something in her emotional space needs protecting. But here's the key: this internal ranking isn't set in stone. It shifts. A man who once held her highest respect can slip if he begins to chase, over-justify, or ignore her boundaries. And another, once overlooked, can quietly rise through steady self-possession, emotional clarity, and respectful distance. Every interaction becomes a subtle test. Does he bring clarity or confusion? Does she feel more herself around him or less? Does he recognize the difference between being tolerated and being cherished? This system is not about vanity, it's about vigilance. A woman learns from her past times when she gave too much, too fast. When she trusted promises that lacked consistency. When kindness was mistaken for deeper intention. So now, she scans for something deeper: consistency, self-awareness, the ability to sit in discomfort without collapsing into control, or retreating into avoidance. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet signals, barely visible, but deeply felt. And she ranks them, silently but decisively. To miss this truth is to misread politeness as passion. To think that physical closeness equals emotional priority. But a woman's behavior is rarely random. If she pulls back, if her replies shorten, If her eyes no longer linger, it's not a game. It's a reshuffling, a reordering of emotional energy. And that reshuffling isn't a verdict on a man's worth. It's a reflection of the emotional experience she associates with him. The goal isn't to gain the system. It's to understand that it exists. And once a man lives from a place of calm inner value without trying to impress, to chase, or to prove, he begins to rise in her perception naturally. No declarations, no begging, no performance, because in a woman's world, the men she truly respects, they don't need to demand a place. They become one. After all, the men a woman truly respects never need to ask where they stand, because her actions will always speak louder than her words. Number 4, the psychology of sexual gatekeeping. Now step into a realm even more intimate and often misunderstood. The way women navigate attraction, not just emotionally, but physically through a protective instinct shaped by centuries of conditioning. Across cultures, across generations, and often across unspoken boundaries, female sexuality has been more than just experienced. It's been managed, molded, and regulated. Not overtly in every case, but through subtle cultural signals that accumulate over time. And what this creates isn't just a set of learned behaviors. It's an internal reflex, a quiet, automatic system of emotional and physical defense that activates even when desire is real. For many men, this creates confusion. Why would a woman pull back just when the connection feels strongest? Why does interest seem to mix with resistance? It's not a riddle. It's a reality, one deeply influenced by her social and emotional landscape. From adolescence, many women are taught, sometimes directly, more often through implication, that their desirability is a kind of currency. That attention from men isn't simply flattering, it's a resource to guard, not to indulge, to control. This creates a paradox. Even when a woman genuinely desires a man emotionally, physically she may hold herself back, not because the attraction isn't mutual, but because, in her world, desire alone isn't always safe. For her, vulnerability comes with risk. And attraction often walks hand in hand with judgment from society, from peers, sometimes even from the man in front of her. That's why what looks like mixed signals is often not about confusion but caution. An internal instinct whispering, hold, wait, watch. This doesn't mean she's being dishonest. It means she's been conditioned to believe that intimacy is something that must be earned, not simply felt. So what happens? She may slow down emotional closeness. She might stretch the time before physical escalation. Or she could place quiet, emotional gates along the path, not as games, but as observations. Will he grow impatient or stay grounded? Will he respond to her resistance with entitlement or with understanding? These aren't questions she asks aloud. They're scripts playing in the background, scripts written from past experience, from social expectation, from emotional self-preservation. At its core, sexual gatekeeping isn't about withholding. It's about protecting. It's her way of holding the reins when emotions are at their most exposed. It helps her avoid regret. It shields her from being misread, rushed, or reduced to a conquest. And through this process, perhaps unknowingly, she measures a man's depth. A man who respects the distance without demanding more. That man signals patience, strength. He shows he's not just there for pleasure, but for connection. A man who pushes past boundaries, who rushes what hasn't ripened. That man reveals more about his intentions than he realizes. Yes, the emotional wall she puts up can feel like rejection. But more often than not, they're temporary fortresses built from uncertainty. What appears as aloofness might just be armor. What feels like hesitation could be her way of saying, "Show me I'm safe here." She isn't always rejecting. Often, she's just waiting to know that her emotional investment will be valued, not taken for granted the moment it's given. In that light, gatekeeping isn't a test to pass or a wall to break down. It's a language. A language that says, intimacy means something to me. A language that says, I open slowly because I've learned that not everyone deserves the first key. For her, boundaries are not built to push men away. They're doors waiting for a knock, not a battering ram. The challenge for any man is not to find a shortcut through this system, but to understand it. To recognize that her emotional caution isn't resistance, it's protection. And that the traits she's listening for beneath every conversation are patience, presence, and restraint. Because for many women, gatekeeping has never been about withholding the act. It's about discerning the intention behind it. Sometimes, what looks like rejection is really just a protective pause. As we explored earlier, a woman's hesitation isn't always a no, it can be a quiet question. Will you still stay if I don't immediately say yes? Number 5. The manipulation of male competition in the delicate world of romantic connection, where few feelings are spoken outright and intentions often stay hidden beneath smiles. A different kind of tension begins to rise when more than one man enters the picture. This tension isn't always obvious, but once it's there, you feel it. An edge in the room, a shift in posture, a subtle change in tone. And make no mistake, this tension is rarely accidental, whether consciously or not. Many women understand the power of presence, the kind of presence that sparks subtle rivalry without a single word. She doesn't need to command a room. She doesn't have to announce her worth. Her awareness of male psychology, whether sharpened through experience or instinct, is enough. She knows, even if quietly, that a single mention of another man, a passing compliment from someone else, or a quick glance that isn't hidden, can send ripples through the dynamic. And in those ripples, a strategy begins to take shape. When men sense competition, when another male presence enters the emotional equation, real or implied, they shift. Suddenly their back straightens. Their tone becomes more deliberate. They start leaning in more literally and emotionally. It's as if something deep within gets activated. This isn't weakness. It's primal instinct. It's evolution at play, our age-old drive to compete, to stand out, to earn what we now fear we might lose. A man might think he's acting from choice, but the moment he senses that someone else might be winning her attention, something changes. He reaches further, tries harder. He starts to value her time more, weigh her words more heavily, watch her choices more closely. The scarcity effect kicks in. If she's wanted by others, she must be valuable. If someone else sees it, maybe I've missed something. It's not logic, it's urgency. And it doesn't always show up when there's no perceived rival. Now, does this mean a woman is playing a cruel game? Not necessarily. This isn't always some manipulative plan, it's often unconscious. It's part of an ancient social script that gets passed on without formal teaching. Sometimes, simply leaving certain signals visible, a text from another man, admiration from someone else, a vague story involving attention, does the work for her, because she knows, at some level, that men rarely chase what they don't fear losing. When competition enters the room, a man's effort intensifies. But so can his anxiety. Here lies the danger. Over time, he may start measuring himself, not by his own standards, but by imagined rivals. Not by connection, but by conquest. That's when cracks begin to form. When the pursuit becomes about winning, not understanding, driven by the fear of missing out. He may not even stop to ask the most important question. Is this truly aligned with what I need, or am I just afraid to lose? And that's where the connection can falter. Because when effort becomes fueled by fear, rather than grounded in authentic desire, the foundation weakens. To be clear, not every woman plays this card. And not every man falls into the pattern. But the dynamic does exist. Quiet, potent, subtle but very real. Recognizing this doesn't require cynicism. It requires maturity. It means asking, is my interest rising from true connection or from competition? Because when a man sees through the fog of rivalry, when he pauses instead of chasing, when he reconnects with his own clarity, he doesn't just protect his peace. He reclaims his power. Now that you've seen how rivalry can quietly shape desire, it becomes easier to understand why many women may feel uneasy about the truths we've explored in this video. Because these aren't just one-off behaviors. They're not random. They are deeply embedded patterns, learned, repeated, and reinforced through years of lived experience, culture, and emotional survival. These dynamic strategic silence, emotional mirroring, subtle testing, guarded intimacy, and the unspoken pull of male competition aren't tools of manipulation. They're reflections of emotional intelligence. They're the strategies women often develop in a world that teaches them to be careful with their hearts, cautious with their truth, and selective with their trust. And for men, understanding these strategies isn't about resisting or pushing back. It's not about blame or bitterness. It's about clarity. It's about stepping out of the fog of confusion and into a place of emotional steadiness. Because once you see the patterns, you no longer get caught in them. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop chasing validation or trying to decode every silence. You stop bending yourself just to be noticed. Instead, you learn to hold your ground, to listen deeply without losing yourself, to be present without performing, to respond not with urgency but with calm. And in that stillness, something powerful happens. You no longer try to be the loudest voice in the room. You become the kind of presence that doesn't need volume to be remembered. That doesn't mean becoming distant or cold. It means becoming emotionally disciplined. A man who doesn't react impulsively but moves with quiet confidence, even in the most emotionally charged moments. That kind of man leaves an impression, not because he begged to be chosen, but because he chose not to abandon himself in the process. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If anything in this message struck a chord, if you saw parts of yourself or someone you've known, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight might be the exact light someone else needs to make sense of their own story. Because sometimes it only takes one honest reflection to unlock years of confusion. And if you're ready to keep exploring the deeper layers of connection, psychology, and self-mastery, this is just the beginning.